Okay, I think that should be going. Okay, great. So our collector for this week is Timo Koponen, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my questionable Finnish pronunciations. But I know we've talked about, or we've seen some of these labels in the past. I know we've had some of them at past events. You can see this one is from Papua New Guinea, which is similar to our collector last week, so LJ Brass, but this is a little bit later. So he's collecting in 1981. This is the specimen, which I think is really lovely. I like this little green moss. It makes me think of green yarn, little pieces of yarn, which is really cute. But a lot of the information today comes from a great article I found in this Estonian newsletter, the title of which translates to Moss Friend, and the salutation translates to Dear Moss Lovers! Exclamation point. And so this issue included an article about the 70-year career and life of Timo Koponen. It was published back in 2009 when he turned 70. And he's still actually alive, so he's retired, but he's still alive. So he's kind of the first living collector for us to feature. So this is Timo, I think, Juhani Koponen, and he is a Finnish bryologist. He was born in 1939 in Varkaus, Finland, which is down here in the kind of southern part of Northern Savonia or North Savo, which I think we've talked about in the context of some other Finnish specimens. He graduated high school in 1957 and entered the University of Helsinki studying botany. He initially studied vascular plants, but quickly switched to bryophytes. He obtained his bachelor's in 1962, and from 1965 to 68, he worked as the curator of the cryptogams at the University's Herbarium. And in 1967, he was appointed to be the curator of the Botanic Museum. And during that whole time, he was conducting his doctoral research on mosses in the family Miniaceae, I believe. And he gained his PhD in 1968. So it's kind of fun. You can follow his botany career and his travels through the specimens. So you can see here, there's a couple that were collected in Finland and Norway during his doctoral research. In 1969 to 1971, he was a postdoctoral fellow in Japan, and he collected across the country, especially focusing on understanding the diversity of the family, the Miniaceae family, and he has become a worldwide specialist in that group of mosses. In 1971, he spent a year at the National Science Museum of Canada in Ottawa, and you can see specimens from a number of provinces, including Saskatchewan, which I had to include for Mina. He took at least one side trip to the United States. The only specimens I can find so far are from Colorado, but it may be that he visited other places. In 1981, so Timo, along with Daniel Norris, who you might see on specimens as D.H. Norris, made a 3-month expedition to Papua New Guinea and collected thousands of specimens. The project was sponsored by the University of Helsinki, Humboldt State University in California, the National Herbarium, and University of Papua New Guinea, and expanded from that into a project documenting the moss flora of Western Melanesia. And a lot of Tennessee's specimens are from this trip. He made a lot of collecting trips to China, various parts of China during the 1980s and 90s, establishing a lot of close ties to contacts there. And several Chinese researchers actually came and visited and were hosted at the Helsinki Herbarium. He authored a number of works on East Asian mosses, and together with his students organized the International Congress of East Asian Bryology in Helsinki in 1990. He was appointed chairman of the Finnish Chinese Botanical Foundation in 1988 and has been an honorary member of the Chinese Botanical Society since then. In 1997, he was invited by the Forestry Department of Hunan Province and asked to carry out biological fieldwork there. And there was a number of expeditions to document the moss flora and other bryophytes in that province. He returned to Japan, Canada, US a number of times. He collected in Australia, Tanzania, so very wide-ranging research. And he also continued to work extensively in his native region. So he helped to establish, preserve, and study local natural areas in Finland, while also teaching students the principles of bryology, systematics, and botanical fieldwork. He was appointed the chief curator of the Cryptogam Herbarium at the University of Helsinki in 1981, made a professor of botany in 1986. And from 1992, he was director of the botanical garden at the university. And then he retired in January 2002 at the age of 63. So since 1981, he has published over 300 scientific articles, over 100 reviews, numerous books and checklists. WorldCat shows this very impressive span of his career from the 1960s to his most recent publication, which actually, if you look, dates to last month. So I'm not sure he's actually retired. Pretty impressive. One source says that he has described 44 species. I wasn't able to get like an official count, but there's a lot of entries in Tropicos with his name on them. There's a number of bryophyte species that were named after him. So both both liverworts and mosses. There's a genus that appears probably named after him, or possibly his wife, or in conjunction. So his wife was also a bryologist, or is also a bryologist. And I haven't been able to find a ton of information about her, but I'm going to try to do some more digging to see if I can feature her as well. And then also one species of lichen that's named after him. So specimen-wise, we don't actually have as much as I would expect to see digitized in our portals yet. There's just under 3,000 in the bryophyte portal, kind of 60-ish in the lichen and Cernic vascular portals. So I expect we'll probably be finding more adding to the portal as this project, and probably a lot is held internationally in other databases and kind of waiting to be digitized. So for example, I found 5,300 specimens in this Finnish biodiversity portal online. One other interesting side note is I found kind of an interesting site on the Finnish Museum of Natural History. So they have these really great little Finnish moss researcher collector profiles. This S.O. Lindberg is one we definitely have specimens from. You can see this name. I know, I think Mina was trying to look up the other day. It was slightly misspelled on a specimen. I know I've seen Brotherus in some of our specimens. And if you look closely, one thing I noticed is the sources for these profiles were written by Timo Koponen. So you can see that he was obviously interested in the history of bryology in his country and helping to kind of share information about other Finnish collectors, which is pretty cool. So the article says that Timo and his wife moved to the Finnish countryside. In 2009, they took a 2-week trip to revisit the beloved places in Japan where they spent 2 years of their lives and to meet old friends. He continues his research work and is an enthusiastic gardener. At that time, he was still publishing 10 to 15 articles a year, and obviously he has not stopped 13 years later. So a very dedicated and influential force in bryology. So that's our collector for today. Any questions or comments? All right, I'm going to stop recording.